All right, Noy, great to have you on the show. Really excited to get into your story. You're an AI genius. Do you want to share a little bit with everyone, a little bit about how you got into AI, a little bit about your story? That's so fascinating.
Hey Ari, I'm happy to be here. I want to say that. Not maybe an AI genius, but I definitely do AI. How do I get into it? So I'm an Israeli, so I had to do my mandatory AI service like everybody here. And it was actually a combat warrior, not anything to do with this field. After my service, I went on to study electronic engineering in Technion, which is a very good engineering school in Israel. And I first encountered AI at school, but it was still kind of futuristic. Not many people were talking about AI like they are today. And so I didn't really get into it, even though it was very fascinating. It was all very futuristic. And I actually did my first job was actually doing chip design, which is what most electronic engineering graduates do. So I did that, and then people started talking about these things called artificial neural networks, and they sounded really cool to me. So I started studying and learning what these things are all about, started playing with them, using open source code, doing more with that. And I noticed that I'm spending a lot of my time doing that, but my work is something else. So I decided, okay, why not search for a job doing that? So I left that other job and started looking for a job doing AI. And in the beginning, all the different places required like a PhD and being an AI expert, even though back then there weren't that many AI experts. It seemed really ridiculous. So I just went on and studied all the things by myself. And I found a job as one of the first employees in a startup trying to help other companies deploy AI. So it took only a few months. And from the place where I tried to get into these other companies to do I was the expert on the startup side, helping these companies actually adopt AI into their business. So that startup was a very nice experience. I've been there for a few years, and we helped many companies have very nice transformations using AI in many different industries. And then when that company became too big, it was like 80 employees, I decided to go on my own journey and started my own company where I help other companies develop AI and implement algorithms into their systems. So that's where I'm at now.
Very cool. What would you say was it specifically around AI that captured you, that got your attention, that was compelling to you as a technology, as an engineer, something to sink your teeth into?
So even though AI and the algorithms have been around for a couple tens of years, we're only experiencing a boom right now, and it's due to the large amounts of data, and a lot of it is due to computing power. That only now we have enough computer power in everyday computers to run these complex algorithms called deep neural networks. So this technology is very transformative. It's only now we're experiencing this revolution around AI. And I thought it's really cool that I can be a part of something new. It's just like computers were about 50 or 60 years ago, and then the internet maybe 20 something years ago. Now we're experiencing the AI revolution, and I wanted to get in on the action. So it used to be that, let's say, when you're interviewing to a programming job, then there are people with like 10 or 15 years of experience doing programming, and I can't compete with that. But there's nobody, almost nobody in the world doing AI for 15 years, and everybody's back to square one, and we're all discovering these algorithms and things together. So it's very cool. And I think also AI lets us do things that were just not possible before. And I think that's awesome. And I not only enjoy developing these algorithms, also telling about it to people, and they're like, whoa, this is possible. I find that really cool.
What are some of the things that you can do with AI that weren't possible prior to AI?
So a lot of the things, some of the things we're doing in our day-to-day life weren't possible a few years ago. let's say Siri and Alexa, these are AI algorithms doing audio recognition and transcribing the things. Like people are actually, we all use them in our day-to-day life, but we don't consider that about 5 years ago, Siri was not nearly as good, and 10 years ago, I don't think Siri existed. Now, that's one thing. Another very cool thing is computer vision. Like we all know about the autonomous cars, but the technology behind them is deep neural networks. So the cameras are sending the photos to computers, to these networks, and they're analyzing them and understanding what's actually in these images in the scene in order for the car to drive by themselves.
Very cool.
So these are very cool things. There are other fields just like natural language understanding and things like that, which are also very developing thanks to AI.
So you're doing a lot of work with different kinds of clients. Can you share with us an example, one or two examples of the kind of AI implementation work that you are doing with current clients?
Mm-hmm. So I work on different domains and industries. A lot of my clients come from the medical device industry. It's because my partner, he does actually embedded software and robotics. So we have we very much we like this industry, and we have a competitive advantage in it. So we get a lot of clients in that industry. What we're actually trying to do is help startups implement algorithms that can replace doctors in some tasks. So we don't think we're going to replace the doctor as a concept as a whole. We just want to take some of the tasks that we can automate using AI, and then let the doctors focus on the things that we can't automate using AI yet. So one of the very interesting startups that I'm working on now, actually, one of the projects that I'm doing now is around automating chest physiotherapy. So people that suffer from chronic lung disease, they can go to a treatment called chest physiotherapy, which helps them and very much improves their quality of life. But they have to go to a specialist that does this, to a physiotherapist, so they can't do it all the time. And if these people can do it by themselves or at home, it can improve their life drastically. So the startup that I'm working with called Synchrony Medical, they've developed together with us a device that lets you do this at home using a special device that you put on yourself and special sensors that use AI algorithms to analyze the state which your chest and lung is right now, and then act accordingly. People will be soon able to do chest physiotherapy at home and then improve the quality of life, even though they're suffering from these kinds of chronic diseases.
Well, a beautiful and meaningful example.
Thanks, David.
It's great.
I mean,
I want to ask a little deeper. What types of basically tasks are being done by AI or can be done by AI in the future that now are done by humans? And then what will and what will humans
That,
be doing if AIs are doing their tasks?
yeah, that's a very good question. So first of all, we need to remember that even though people are talking about AI and everything is going to be done by AI, we're still, all the AI we're doing right now it's called narrow AI. What does that mean? We can only train an AI to do very specific tasks. So for example, in the algorithm that we're working on with this company is using sensors to detect the position of the chest and breathing and all kinds of things, but it can't do something else. It can do only that specifically. And that's narrow AI. A general AI, like I can ask you something like 3 times 4, and then I can ask you about the height of the Eiffel Tower. And for you, these tasks, even though they're completely unrelated, you can easily switch between these tasks. So AI doesn't know how to do this yet. We can train AI to do very specific tasks. what are the tasks that we can relatively easily train AI to do? The tasks that we can have a lot of labeled data for. What does that mean? Machine learning and deep learning algorithms, they need labeled data in order to train. So if we have things that we can show the AI a lot of examples of, then, and we can train it to replace the doctors. I think the most developed field in medicine around this is trying to figure out CT scans and all those kind of things, like find cancerous cells and tissues and all that kind of stuff, instead of the doctors having to look at the picture, because we can create a lot of examples of this contains a cancerous cell, this doesn't, and we can train an AI algorithm to switch the doctor doing that. But task, let's say you just go to the doctor and you have to talk to him or her and tell him what's my problem, and there are a lot of different variables, and it's possible that you're not even sick. It may be some psychological issue, can be many different things. AI is not nearly there because it's very general.
What would you
Did I answer your question?
I think so. Let me just summarize a bit and see if I understood you. So you can use AI, if I understand you correctly, for anything where I have a data set and some kind of very specific pattern, I guess. Is that correct?
Yeah, so AI and deep learning is exactly what you're saying. It's about finding patterns. That's very much true. So the AI can identify the patterns and give an answer.
Okay, so as a musician, like there's a creative process, right? Is that something that you could also, I mean, I guess the pattern here is to jump into all kinds of unrelated things and then see whatever turns out to be somehow interesting or meaningful. Like, I mean, is that something AI will eventually do, or is that something that humans will probably for a long time be doing?
So these AI algorithms, they also can be used as tools to do many different things. So one of the things they can do right now is it's called generative models. And so they can generate music or movies or paintings and all that kind of stuff. That's something that already exists. So you can ask, if we're going back to the previous question, what are the patterns that these algorithms are seeing? So we actually don't really know, but what we do is we show these algorithms many different musical compositions, and we can say, oh, this is a classical music composition, this is jazz, and the AI by itself finds patterns in this music, and then you can say, oh, try and generate a new sample just like this, and the AI can create something like that. So first of all, that's how it's done in relation to what we talked about as pattern finding. And you can say then, what's the role of the musician? So the musician actually has a very important role. This AI is only a tool. It's not something that's going to replace the musician. It's something that can enable the musician to do things that weren't possible before. I bet 50 years ago, people were not editing music by a computer, right? They had to do it some other ways. And now they can use computers and studios and do many different things and manipulate the music. AI is just another tool that will enable artists to create and generate music and improve their art in other ways. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking that it's going to replace art and everybody's going to listen to completely AI generated music. I think that artists are going to use AI and generate their own music, and the artist will be the one using it. It's going to be enhancing and generating things, and maybe something that we can't even imagine. I bet there are going to be new musicians in new music genres that are just being enhanced by AI.
New music genres enhanced by AI. David, what are your thoughts around that in terms of like what Soji is or becoming? Also curious, Noy, what you think about that. How Soji might even be a leader in that.
Well, I'm approaching it, of course, from a perspective of somebody who knows a little bit about music and production. And so at the moment, I'm kind of just thinking about the ingredients you need to make, let's say, a good album. And you know, you need the musicians, you need the ideas, there's musical theory to explain them. But basically, you kind of, through practice, you kind of absorb it, and the best music usually is not written conceptually. It's more like something where you play with some ideas, and it's a creative process, and then it gets something nice out of it, and then you know some rules that are likely to produce a good result, but then you still add some other notes that don't really quite fit the rules, and you test with it, and then something cool comes out. And then there's the production side, where there's actually an audio engineer and a producer, and they work together, and they make it sound great. The audio engineer suggests a lot of different things. I'm pretty sure that a lot of those suggestions could be generated by an AI, because many of them are somewhat algorithmic, like they're step-by-step things you can do. And many probably can't. Like, for instance, there is Timbaland, the producer. He did, for instance, the Aliyah song back in the day with this baby. There's this baby sound, you know. I find it very hard to imagine an AI that comes up with a baby sound. Not impossible, but yeah, and that was like special about the song. So I think to conclude, so I see us working on those already known ingredients already, and bringing, wherever it's possible, bringing technology there to make the lives easier, faster, enable people to have a one button basically demo tape, and so they don't need to spend thousands of dollars on studio time and technicians, and to get to like 80% of the studio quality with AI helping out. But that said, in the broader picture, I don't really know, because similarly, we don't know what the technology will enable. We know what we have now, and we can find bridges to use the technology to bring that into the future. But maybe the technology will radically change things, and maybe this step-by-step process doesn't make sense from a future perspective. So that's what I can say. But I'm excited about the journey, and can't wait to see it happen.
Noy, what are your thoughts on that?
I really liked what David said. I think there are two parts to how AI can help a musician create music. One of them is actually what I talked about before. It's about the generation. So maybe he needs some kind of sound or something to fit in, and he can try an AI suggest me something. Maybe the AI can suggest a few things, and the musician actually chooses what fits best. Maybe the musician, like you said, can create something that the AI can't think about, but the other way around is also possible. The AI will just think of something that the musician didn't think about. So this is one part, but I think the other part can be also very interesting and enabling. I think that right now, making a professional sounding song is not very cheap. You have to go to a studio, and just like you said, a sound or audio engineer, and people have to put in work that's expensive and use expensive equipment. I believe AI and other technologies will help people be able to record professional sounding music from their own home, maybe using an iPhone or just very cheap equipment, and we can automate using AI the role of the audio engineer and the sound engineer to make a person able to record something professional sounding using their own smartphone. And I think this is a very cool direction that can enable everybody to create professional sounding music and remove this price barrier to making professional sounding songs. I found that really cool.
Yeah, that's very compelling, very exciting. It's sort of like if you think of what YouTube did to quote unquote television and movies, where if you have an iPhone or if you have a laptop, you have a video studio, and with YouTube, you've got a distribution platform. And if you play
Mm-hmm.
with what YouTube enables you, you can get 5,000 subscribers, 10,000 subscribers, and build an audience. I think to a degree that's our vision for Soji, where if you're creative and you're inspired, you don't need to be Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, Billie Eilish, the biggest. You don't even have to want to be that known. But if you're creative and passionate, then that's a way to build an audience. And that's a very exciting place to be in terms of culture and also in terms of technology.
Yeah, definitely.
What would you
Yeah,
say?
it feels like a tipping point, really. Like there's just about yeah. Um,
Tipping point in terms of what? What do you mean tipping point?
in terms of, I think, because a lot of work that we had to do, like first, let's say the machines replaced manual labor. I mean, it's like, you know, and then a lot of now in the future where you have checklists, let's say doctors or lawyers, accountants, from those are all patterns. It sounds like that could be a lot of diagnostics and maybe help with your taxes and stuff like that might be doable via AI if they're clearly defined rules and patterns, or even with a normal algorithm, right? So a lot of that might go away. And then the cars will drive themselves, as we just heard. And so I think what could really happen from what it sounds like is that we could move forward into a more creative, passion-driven economy where you really do what you're best at, and it's a creative kind of work. And then all the things that have been figured out in the past that are just doing, they'll be done by machines to a large degree. So I think that's very exciting, and that's what I mean by tipping point. And then there's of course a question about distributing the resources, because only some parts of the industry produce, let's say, physical goods, and machines aren't really interested in listening to my music, I suppose. So there needs to be some new way of thinking about that. And in that sense, I really like the what you said about the enabling creators. People basically, if they're into music, if that's their thing, then they can be on this platform, and then they can earn a living that way. And hope to see that in many different fields.
One of the big questions around AI, this is like the famous question, is it making things better or is it making things worse? A lot of people are like, quote unquote, have this vision of like robots controlling things. But then I'm sure, given that you're an expert, you're working in this, you're seeing how there's this symbiosis with medical devices, with autonomous vehicles, with audio production, et cetera. What are your thoughts in terms of what a future might look like in terms of the relationship that the creator, whether the creator's a musician or the creator's an actor, the creator's a doctor, the creator's an accountant or a lawyer, or a taxi driver, with this AI-enabled technologies?
You kind of confused me there with a taxi driver as a creator,
Okay.
because I think most of the other things you said are jobs that AI can help with. I mean, I think people that think about robots controlling us, they don't really understand what AI is. I think we call it artificial intelligence, but it's a technology just like any other technology we had. When people invented machines and electricity, people were like, oh, this is bad, this is going to change us, this is the devil or something. And then the same thing came with the internet and many different things. And in the end, AI is not actually going to replace us. It's very far from there, maybe in the far future, which we might not even see. AI is an enabler. It's a very nice technology that enables us to do many different things and spend our actual intelligence doing things that weren't possible before. So I think with one of the words we said a lot is creativity. And I think that AI is a very good enabler for creativity, because it takes kind of mundane, not creative tasks and automates them and lets us humans concentrate on our intelligence, on creating and being creative. And I think that's very cool. And I don't see it in the negative manner where AI is going to replace and control us. I think that's very, very far and futuristic and probably will not happen, just like I don't know, electricity isn't controlling us or something like that.
I don't think it's controlling us. Yeah, David, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I once sat at a dinner table with a scientist, and we were discussing basically how certain things are introduced and framed, and people speak about them. And he said when first the gas was introduced to instead of fireplaces in the homes, also it wasn't communicated as we want to bring an invisible smell, like odorless gas into your home that explodes and causes a death. Instead, it was communicated as, we want to enable you to cook your dinner by the push of a button. And both of them are somewhat true, but you kind of manage the risk. Of course, you have certain regulations around the gas pipes. You have, so basically you don't just put in AI in a car and enable it to learn to do whatever it wants, and then if it chooses to run over people, so that that there's just, I think it's a matter of controls and regulations and awareness of the risks that might be associated with it. That's what I think.
We met with Noy. David and I met with an AI expert where they provide a solution for actors, voiceover actors. So typically, the voiceover actor for like Hollywood, Netflix, whatever, you're making the next Pixar. You go into the studio. You've got a whole studio to do the voiceover. You got the script. You're acting. When COVID happened, so you couldn't go to the studio. So they created some AI technology that makes the sound as if it's enabled. So you have a voiceover actor who doesn't need to go to the studio anymore, which is like it's a big idea, similar to what we were talking about before. What are other predictions that you have around, I don't know, television, film, music production in the entertainment sphere of AI impacting that industry?
So just like we talked about generative models in music, there are also the same thing happening in movies. So first of all, some things that what used to be very expensive, like generating very, very complex animations, let's say like in Game of Thrones, the dragons are very impressive, and they were very expensive to make because a lot of technicians and a lot of computing power. AI enables us to do this a lot more easily with a lot less people and a lot less compute power. So that's one thing. I think we're going to see animations with much higher quality, and they were going to be much cheaper, which means a lot of different not as expensive productions as Game of Thrones are going to be able to use these things, because you don't see like home movies having dragons like in Game of Thrones, right? So we're gonna see that in a few years. We're gonna have very nice animations everywhere. Another technology that's coming up is what we call deep fakes. So they can actually change a person or an actor to be somebody else. So let's say it might be possible, let's think what people can do with that, there's going to be an actor that's playing in some movie, and they're going to use AI technology to change him out of the movie and put another actor instead of him. Okay, let's say they A/B tested the movie and found out that people rather see you, Ari, than David. So they can switch you out without actually having you in the movie set, which can be very cool. You can actually check YouTube and see how they insert Mike Tyson into some kind of movie themes, and it's very funny because it's Mike Tyson, but the technology is already there, and it's something we can do. And I believe just like a few years ago, Pixar invented animated technology. It was a couple tens of years ago, and now we see animated movies all the times, like a computer animated. And I think in maybe 10 or 20 years, this technology is going to be almost human-like and realistic, and maybe we're going to see also combinations of actors and AI generated music movies. And we can't predict the future, but it sounds very creative and cool.
So do you think I will see some Humphrey Bogart, like some actor from the 30s, 40s, I don't know, or even in a new movie and in color, And do you think I would see, for instance, I would hear Frank Sinatra sing songs that, were written in 2022?
I 100% think that's gonna happen. But both these predictions, we're gonna have singers sing new songs that they never sung before, and also actors and other characters talking to us like they're alive. I saw some demonstration of Abraham Lincoln talking, like a movie, and I think he wasn't alive when the movie was invented.
Well,
So
fascinating.
That is fascinating. So so the other side of that is that an actor who, their whole lives have been trained to be an actor. So I was like, well, what am I going to, I was trained at Juilliard. I'm this professional actor. I've got an agent. Now Humphrey Bogart, a deepfake is going to replace me. What would be an answer to the creator themselves, how AI is enabling them for more success and impact rather than the opposite?
yeah, so this has two sides, right? On one hand, he can say Humphrey Bogart is going to replace me. On the other hand, he can now scale himself, right? If we have somebody that's very popular, let's say a George Clooney becomes the best deepfake, the most popular, everybody wants to see him. We can now put him in movies he didn't actually have to act in and scale him without even having him to act. So this has two sides. You can also enlarge your brand and have people in commercials, and they don't even have to act. They just have to brand themselves and be the best AI actor, right?
It raises a question for me about identity and ownership of your, let's say, persona in a sense. Um, do you have any thoughts on that? Like basically, if I have an AI representing me, do I own the AI? Do I own the rights to my own voice in a sense, if it's indistinguishable from the real one?
That's a very interesting question. On my personal opinion, yes, somebody shouldn't be allowed to just deep fake you into some kind of movie and make you say whatever he wants. At least not share it publicly. Let's say I want to do this on my own computer. I can edit your photos and do all kind of things without AI. But if I
Yes.
publish it, then I think you have a right to your own voice and face and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
If we go
interesting.
back to that previous point, I think it's a similar revolution to what happened when movies were invented, right? It used to be that actors actually have to act for people to see them in shows, and then they invented the cinema, and then actors can be in many different cinemas all around the world without having to act all the time. So it's a kind of scale. And now we're going to have another time they don't even have to act once, and they can be all over the world.
Interesting. And could we also use the example of like when YouTube was first published, you could probably use any copyrighted song because nobody was monitoring it. As YouTube grew, you can't use any music, any video without proper copyright messaging. So when you publish, it gets tracked to a extent. So if you're deep faking George Clooney or whoever, at the end of the day, he'll get the rights to whatever is being published to him. Is that possible? Meaning no matter what, if
we can't really know. I believe the world is going to be there and the regulation goes there. But just like you said, this is only the beginning, and the legislators are going to fight over it and decide what you have your rights to and what is not considered yours.
Does NFT have anything? Can you NFT an AI persona, an essence, so that way it's...
Well, how do you find a persona, right? I mean, what is it that makes George Clooney George Clooney? It's kind of a really difficult question.
That's an interesting question, and I can't really comment on NFTs because I don't feel like that's my expertise. Like I don't know that much about it, but they're definitely a way to distinguish between original things. So it's an interesting direction, I think, thinking about it in that way. What you said, David, about how you define a persona, that's also it's a very interesting question because these generative models are based on something called GAN, a generative adversarial network. It's a specific kind of neural network. So they train it using pictures of real people. So let's say I train my GAN using images of real people, and then I generate an image that came out of the GAN. Okay, so it's based on real people, but it's something that it's a person that never existed. So it can be an exact combination of you two. Okay, it can have be exactly in the middle between Ari and David. So is this image considered new, or is it maybe half yours and half yours? Because let's say I'm not creating an exact George Clooney. I'm making it exactly the same, just totally different hair.
Yeah, nose of Brad Pitt.
Yeah, exactly. So is this a new person, and does he not have a right for his image right now? It raises a lot of interesting questions.
Lots of interesting questions.
So what's the state of all this? Is that at all part of the discussion among legislators? Are you aware of that?
So the European Union just published a very long AI regulation document, and they're going that I haven't read all of it, but the general direction is that they're going on the side of making it very strict, meaning all your data is yours, and you need explicit permission for everything. So that's the direction they're going in. But I think a lot of things are going to change. Let's say I talked about the medical imaging industry, right? So do you have the rights to a microscope photo of your cells, your tissue? So they say, yes, you do. Even though you're obviously, nobody can recognize you from them and all that kind of stuff, but you have the rights to your images. They're yours. Nobody can just use them to train a model or something like that.
Very cool.
But I tell you the truth, I'm not enough. I don't know about, I haven't read enough about these regulations, and we can talk about that some other time.
Well, I mean, because they're also developing, right? I'm sure it's like, it's probably some parts are still gray zone, some parts are overregulated, some are completely unregulated. It's a tough field to navigate for. I think we'll have to get up to speed on that for audio.
Definitely.
So
yeah. Super fascinating. It's also very exciting that you're so much of an expert at this stage, right? It's not 10 years ago. It's definitely not 20 years ago, and it's not 10 years from now. It's a really, really exciting time to have an expertise in AI. I'm excited about definitely what we're building. Where can people find more out about Noy Shulman?
Oh, so I have a newsletter where they can read. It's called The Intersection. So I'll love, you can just Google The Intersection or Noy Shulman and find me on LinkedIn. I also share my thoughts on LinkedIn and the AI School for Leaders, where I share content about AI for leaders, how they can transform their companies using this technology. So we can link it. You can Google it. You can Google my name, Noy Shulman, and yeah, that's it.
Everybody go sign up to Noy's newsletter. We're learning a lot from you. We appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. And we're excited about what we're doing together with Soji and beyond.
Definitely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, guys.
We're going to have to do this again. We're going to do it again. There were too much. We need to go like 3 hours next time.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.